What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. A little update here since I last posted. Open water fishing's done. We're moving on to hard water. There's not quite ice on all the lakes yet, but it's the week before Thanksgiving and there's likely to be walkable ice on Red Lake, so people will be out hitting the hard water here shortly. I was able to get out one more time chasing muskies with suckers, and we didn't have any success. It was a really slow day. Water temps were, you know, the mid to upper 30s, and fish activity was pretty slow, and it gets a little challenging the further into the year we get. So we were ultimately unsuccessful, and now my mind is transitioning over to hard water season. And part of what I like to do before the season is do routine maintenance on my equipment. And a big piece of equipment for me, or an important piece of equipment for me, is actually my ATV. I use this to pull my spear shack around. I'll likely use it on early ice up on Red. And one of the things I want to do is replace the drive belt on it. And that's something I haven't done since I've owned this ATV. I'll go over the ATV in just a little bit, but essentially I've owned it since about 2016. It was a carryover, brand new model I bought. Got a super good deal on it. And I love the machine, but you have to keep up on routine maintenance with your things. If you treat your things well, your equipment well, it'll treat you well. So that's what we're going to do tonight. I need to adjust this a little bit. I almost forgot. Before we do that, I got to clean this place up. We just recently kind of did all of our fall yard work for the year and moved all of our patio furniture and some other stuff into my shop here where we stored for the winter. And there's a bunch of stuff in the way, so I'm going to clean that up first, and then we're going to get working on this ATV. Stay tuned. Okay, so I know I mentioned that I was going to do the drive belt. I'm actually going to do two other things real quick here. Generally speaking, when it comes to equipment I use for recreational purposes, meaning on vacations or in my free time, I like to go above and beyond. Preventative maintenance, using high quality OEM parts where I'm able to do so, assuming they're still offered. And the reason for that is I personally believe that stuff has been engineered and designed to allow your equipment to operate as it was originally intended. And that's super important to me. The last thing I want to do is deal with issues when I'm out on the water or in the woods or on the ice. I want to make sure my equipment's in tip-top shape. So the two other things I'm going to go over here in just a second, but let me explain this drive belt to you guys here real quick. Okay, so as I mentioned, I like to use high quality parts on equipment I use for recreational purposes. My ATV is certainly one of those. So I went with an OEM drive belt here. I ordered it through Country Cat. Awesome place to order parts from, super fast shipping, and reasonably priced too for OEM. So that's the main task for this evening, is the drive belt there. I'm also going to add a new battery maintainer. If I'm running a generator or my ATV's parked outside overnight when I'm ice fishing, I usually like to plug the battery in just to make sure that it's got maximum power when I go to crank over the engine to avoid any chance of it not starting, I guess. And then new this year is I actually am going to add this kind of 3M stick-on engine block heater to my ATV. I have no idea how good this is going to hold up, but oftentimes when we're up on northern Minnesota lakes for spearing or ice fishing, whatever the case may be, it can be negative 30 out, negative 40 out, and the machines just do not want to start when that happens. It can be really challenging to get the battery to crank over the really, really thick engine fluids. So I'm going to add this, and I think my intention with this will be is I'll plug it in like 10 minutes, 15 minutes before I intend to start the unit, and hopefully that'll warm up the fluids enough that it'll allow it to turn over more easily, use less battery amperage, and also prevent premature wear on engine components. So that's the ticket tonight. I think we're going to start the drive belt because I think that's going to take the most amount of time. If I had to guess, that's probably a 2 to 3 beer job. So we're going to put that to the test. And then we're going to transition over to these two things. Kind of why we have the side panels off the ATV here. And that's going to be the ticket tonight. That's going to be the... Okay, so I've been giving this one over, trying to figure out how invasive this process is really going to be. Let me show you guys kind of what I'm looking at here so I can take you guys along on this journey with me. Okay, so we need to pull this side cover off this machine. And as far as I can tell, we are going to need to pull off the black plastic shrouding here along the footboard. And the reason for that is there's a couple bolts down here that are going to be very difficult to access if we don't. It should be pretty non-invasive, I think. We should be able to, I don't know how well you guys can see that, pop these Torx screws out, and I think it'll come off pretty quick and easy. I should be able to do most of these with an impact, but I may have to use a socket on some of them, given it's kind of tight angles in here. So we're gonna start with that. We're gonna pull that off, and then we're gonna try and get that cover off here. Okay, so I have the entire floorboard or footboard surround taken off the side panels here. And the one thing I wish I would have done sooner is there's actually a bolt that holds the brake lever here, the foot lever in. I should have removed that right away. It would have made getting this around off much easier. I honestly probably could have kept it all intact, but essentially there's, if I'm looking at this here, I need to clean all this out now that I have it off, but there's these two bolts that hold the footboard in place, which connects to this back section of plastic here for the wheel well. And there's two more on the front here that effectively hold it onto the bracket here. Pretty easy to take off, all things considered. Super non-invasive. I don't think I'd want to do it on the trail or on a lake, but it wasn't too bad to do here in my shop. It took about 15 minutes, 10 minutes, something like that. So the next thing that I'm going to accomplish here is I'm going to pop this side cover off. I'm going to take all these bolts out, pop it off, and we're going to have a look at both clutches, the primary and secondary. We're going to pull the old belt off. We're going to have a look at that, make sure there's no unusual wear. We're going to inspect the clutches, make sure there's no unusual grooves, that all the rollers and weights look like they're properly aligned, properly functioning, and then we're going to reinstall the new belt. Hold tight. So one of the things I'm realizing as I'm doing this is that there's this little, I don't know how well you guys will be able to see that. There's a rubber washer. Oh, focus for me. There, maybe you can see a little better there. There's a rubber washer that goes between the external clutch cover and the bolt itself. I'm just making sure that I keep that with every single bolt I'm pulling off of here. They want to stick to the cover itself. And then in doing so, I'm being careful to pull them off of here real gently, so that I don't damage them or rip them or anything, because I intend to reuse them. Something that's not surprising is the rubber washers on the bottom are in worse shape than the ones on the top, which is to be expected. That's where all the debris from the tires, your feet kicking it. I mean, it's where they run into the most, or I guess the greatest chance of impact, so it's not surprising that they're in worse shape. What I'm actually going to do is when I reinstall them, I'll put the ones that are in worse shape up towards the top and put the better conditioned ones down on the bottom. That came off a lot harder than I was expecting. It's a little stuck on there. I mean, it's been 7 years since it's been assembled, so I guess that's not surprising, but at first glance it looks to be in pretty good shape. So I'm going to have a closer inspection here, and I'll try and give you guys some close-up shots of this. So at first inspection here, the gasket seems to be in pretty dang good shape yet, which is good because I didn't plan to replace that. There's some dirt and debris in here. I'm going to use a paper towel to kind of wipe that out. It's really important not to use any sort of solvent, brake cleaner, carb cleaner, etc. on these gaskets. They'll swell or shrink depending on the material, and then they just won't fit properly. So I'm actually going to pop this off and set it off to the side here and get this cleaned up quick. Okay, so we got the clutch cover here cleaned up pretty good. There was a little bit of residue in there from, you know, pieces of the old belt kind of wearing off with heat and whatnot, but I went through and I made sure to clean this up real good. So the gasket sits on there again, and now we're gonna go look at the clutches and see if we can pull the belt off and put the new one on. So at first glance here, everything looks to be in pretty good shape, all things considered. All the plastic pieces in the primary clutch look to be in good shape. Not sure how well you guys can see all that, but everything's in pretty good shape at this point. Secondary looks to be good. Once I pull the belt off, I'll check to see if there's any grooving on the inside, and we'll go from there. Everything I read online said you're supposed to be able to use one of the shoulder bolts from the outside cover to actually pull this clutch apart to get the belt off, but they aren't fitting, so I'm gonna have to find a different bolt to go in there to help pop that belt off. Otherwise, we're gonna end up taking this nut here off the primary clutch, disassembling that, pulling the belt off, putting the new one on, and reassembling this to the proper torques and specs. So we'll go from there. We're gonna try this first, see if we can make that work. Otherwise, we'll have to go that route. Okay guys, this is an important lesson. Anytime you own a piece of equipment, when in doubt, always check the supplied tools that come with your ATV. I pulled my little toolkit out right here from the seat, and it comes with this bolt here that my assumption is intended to pull this clutch out. So we're going to give that a shot. It does thread in, it's the appropriate threading. So I am going to kind of lightly torque this to see if we can't pull this clutch apart to swap out the belt here. Got it. So that worked really well. Not sure how well you can see this, but it's actually in pretty decent shape. I wouldn't say there's any signs of premature wear. At this point, it looks to be in pretty decent shape, which is good because I'm actually going to keep this as a backup. Regardless though, I do intend to swap this out for the new one just as a preventative measure, as I mentioned earlier. In my opinion, it's just a good thing to do. These belts can stretch with the tension on the clutch. over a long period of time. So getting a new belt on and getting that tighter fit, I think will be a good thing. All things considered though, it looks to be in really good shape. I'm actually really happy with the wear of it. I will inspect these clutches here in just a second, but given the shape this belt's in, I'm not too concerned that there's going to be any issues with those. I mean, this thing has very low miles. It's got on the odometer 931 miles. Of that, I would say only 700 to 750 are probably real miles. I run tracks on this in the winter, which you guys will see in an upcoming video, and they add additional mileage to it. If you're going 30 miles an hour land speed, the speedometer will say you're going 55, so it's adding miles to the machine every time I run those tracks wide open. So, which I don't care about. I don't intend on selling this. This thing is a utilitarian tool for me that helps me do the things I love to do. So mileage means nothing to me as long as I can make sure I find the time to do things like this in a preventative manner. Okay guys, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see this, but I'm going to try and shine the light in there so you guys can see. These clutches look basically brand new from everything I can see. So I'm not going to do too much more inspecting. This thing's run great. It's always driven great, so I'm not worried about it. I am going to clean my hands up to get any sort of grease and other debris off, and then we're going to install the new belt. Okay, so as we're getting ready to install this, I don't know how well you can see this, but there is a little arrow on this belt. I do not believe, to the best of my knowledge anyway, that belts are direction specific. I'm pretty sure you can install them either way. I believe that arrow is just on there as an indicator to kind of remind you which direction you had the belt facing should you ever need to take it off and put it back on. But I thought I should mention that as I was looking at this belt and just making sure the part number matched with the belt I just took off. It does appear as though they want the belt facing this direction in the way that the machine is driving, and that's what we're going to do, although I don't think it's super important. So all I'm doing is I put the belt into the primary clutch first, and then I fed it over the top, and I'm simply just turning the secondary clutch and feeding the belt towards the bottom, and so it lines up, and there we go. She's reinstalled. Now we'll back this nut out here, and we should be all set to put the clutch cover back on, which should be the most interesting part, I think, of this whole reinstall here. So as I'm pulling this bolt out, I'm just kind of running the secondary clutch to make sure that it kind of reseats itself with the belt on there properly. And as you can see, it's tightening up real nice now while I'm spinning this. So I think we're going to be in pretty good shape here. I should also mention, it helps to put the machine in neutral while you're doing this, and I just set the parking brake to keep it from rolling, but now I should be able to turn these clutches freely given that we're in neutral. And it looks good. It looks good from my perspective. I'm not an expert by any means, but it looks like it should work just fine. So we're going to reinstall that clutch cover now. Okay, so here's our clutch cover. The important thing here is to make sure this gasket that seals between the clutch casing on the motor itself and this clutch cover align so that your bolts go back in place properly. I'm going to try and do that, but I think this is going to be probably the most challenging part of this reinstall. Okay, so what just happened there was there's two doweling pins on each side. One's in the cover and one's in the casing on the engine. And when I go to line that gasket up, the bottom wanted to sag and the top wanted to sag. So what I did was I simply inserted a bolt on both sides to hold that gasket in place while I lined the doweling pins. Then I had 4 points of connection, and now it looks like the gasket's pretty much aligned. If I push the bolt through, I'm hitting the threads, and the gasket seems to be seating properly. So I'm just gonna go through, align all of these bolts, get them partially started, then slide the cover back into place, make sure the gasket's set real good, and then I'm gonna tighten everything up here. Okay, so now that I just quickly snugged them up with the impact, I didn't tighten them with the impact, I just snugged them. I'm going to go through by hand and tighten them. I don't want to over tighten them, so I want to use extra caution and kind of take my time and do this by hand. Okay, so now that I've got this all snugged up, put back together, I'm going to look for a good place to put this. My oil pan is situated right up here, and I am going to try and figure out a way to stick this bad boy on there so I don't block the plug, so I can get at it when I change oil in the spring and warm the engine in the process and warm the fluids up in the process as well. Okay, so there just is not a good spot to mount this thing on the engine oil pan. So what I'm going to do as a consolation here, I think, is I'm considering right below the dipstick here, which obviously touches oil down below. I think I'm going to wrap it along the bottom of this piece here and up over the sides and stick it there. And hopefully the warmth from that will heat the rest of the metals around it and the fluids themselves and be better than nothing to help me kind of get this thing started when it's super cold out. And with my luck, I may never end up needing it, but I have to imagine placing it there will be better than nothing at this point. So I'm not sure how well you guys will be able to see this. I'm doing the best I can. I'm going to clean this with brake cleaner. And let it dry good to have a decent surface or a decently clean surface for that piece of 3M to stick to. Okay, I checked the oil while I was in there. Oil levels look good. We're going to let this dry for a couple minutes and then we're going to adhere it. Well, I'm not exactly sure how well that's going to work. I may try and find one with a slightly smaller size to it. It sticks really well on the bottom surface down here, but I don't know how well you guys can see this. I'll grab my phone here in a second and kind of zoom in, but it won't wrap the side of the oil pan. It just wants to stick on the bottom and not the side, which might be fine, but given how hot this gets and how close it is to this electrical connection, I'd rather almost not chance it. I'm going to leave it for now, but I think what I'm going to do is try and find one with just like a slightly smaller size to it that'll just fit right on the bottom there real nicely and stick real good. I have concerns that this over time with vibrations will flap and loosen up and potentially even fall down, and then if it's sitting on the plastic down below, it may get hot enough to melt the plastic, and I don't, on the skid plate anyway, and I don't want to chance any sort of fire hazard with this. I mean, this is a nice to have, it's not a need to have, so we are going to see if we can figure out something different for this. I like the idea, it's just this isn't the right size for the job here. Okay, so while I'm on this side of the ATV and I have the seat off already to run this electrical line for that heating pad, what I'm going to do here is actually hook up the new battery maintainer, and I will show you guys how to do that here in just a second. Okay, so the battery box on this machine is under the seat, and you simply pull and slide. I usually try to keep this pretty clean and clean it out 2 or 3 times a year. But we are actually going to pop this line here and this line here and replace this connection that sits right behind my seat so that we have a cover for it. Again, it doesn't corrode, and I can use this one indoors versus outside. Okay, it's getting late here tonight. The last thing we have to do is reassemble all of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean this all up good, clean the floorboard up good. Since I have it apart, get rid of any dirt, sand, other debris that may have gotten in there over the years. Install the rear section first, then the front section, get that all put back in place, then reinstall the brake pedal. Should be pretty painless. I'm not going to bore you guys with it. We'll do a time lapse here or something instead. And then I'll throw a conclusion at the end of this video. Alright guys, so all things considered, I'd say that went pretty well. First time doing that on this particular ATV, and it was pretty seamless. I actually spent more time messing around with the oil pan heater pad deal than I actually did on probably the clutch cover. And what I would say is, had I not been trying to film this whole thing, and had I not had those other distractions of those couple other tasks I wanted to get done, I bet you I could have done this in 30 minutes, 40 minutes max, maybe. It wasn't a very long job. So in terms of adult beverages, that's maybe 1 beer, 2, depending on your preference. But what I didn't show you guys earlier is I actually tested out to make sure that the belt was going to operate properly before I reassembled everything, but I'll show you guys here real quick that it does in fact roll and operate as intended. So there you have it. She moves, she grooves. She's gonna tow fish houses this year. She's going to put us on spots where we can hopefully create some pretty cool content for you guys, and she's ready to go. But we do have one more task to execute on this particular machine before we actually take it out ice fishing, before too much snow flies here. But that's in a future video, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys here tonight. Take care. Thanks for watching.